The Worship Arts Committee asked me to talk about transgender and non-binary issues and how we can all be more aware and more welcoming and inclusive of our trans and non-binary cousins. I'll start with some stories to demonstrate that, just like cisgender folks, every person's story is different. Kit writes, I was so scared to come out as non-binary to my husband. After all, he only likes women. I thought he'd feel betrayed. But 6 years later, he's my biggest supporter, who misgenders me less than I do. This is a longer tale by Alyssa, who was giving a talk at her professional conference. Many people will realize they might be trans very young. It took me longer to get there in my conscious self, but somehow something was always different. I went to Catholic school for all 12 years of my primary and secondary education, and even as early as first grade, I found it difficult to make friends with the other boys in the class. I just didn't enjoy the physical part of the games, and so many of the boys' recess games were about tackling or hitting other kids, and I didn't find it fun. I enjoyed the competition part, but not the violence. By third and fourth grade, it had gone from just being a loner to being the victim of actual bullying. Fourth grade was the worst, because I had a teacher that would punish me for coming in from recess with cuts or torn pants. So I was the new kid for 7th and 8th grade in a different school. I just kept my head down. The summer before 7th grade was also the first time I can remember starting to think it would be better if I was a girl. I started wearing my mother's clothes, and once I had a job, I started buying some of my own. But I eventually got careless about keeping it hidden. Mom found out, and all hell broke loose in the house. My parents screamed and screamed, accused me of being gay, which I am, but not the way they thought. They asked me point blank if I wanted to be a girl. Sadly, I was too scared to say yes, and so I managed, I don't know. At college, I hit it off with 3 good friends who were to be my roommates for all 4 years, but the secret side of me was still there, and I had access to the internet for the first time. I found an entire community of people just like me, and it gave me a hope that I could actually be a woman like I wanted to be. I adopted the name Alyssa then, and began to look into steps for coming out. Circumstance prevented that for another 20 years. Fortunately, my wife has been 100% supportive, as were the large majority of my friends, when I made it public in August and changed my name in November. My parents remain a work in progress, but I think they'll get there. Saf is a Brit, and they write, my name's Saf, and I'm non-binary. It's the day after International Women's Day, and although I'm grateful that lots of people thought of me and tagged me and stuff, I'm actually non-binary. I'm open about it. All of my friends and family know. I talk about it on here a lot. Kai is a genderqueer sword lesbian, poet and published author, co-parent and an IT security professional. According to their Twitter feed, yesterday they repaired and expanded their backyard drip irrigation system, put up 8 jars of beautiful crabapple blossom jelly, and laser-etched a dragon onto a wooden shield. Kai's Twitter bio says, they, them, internet crush, genderqueer, polyam, allo-romantic, profane poet, trauma-informed, actually a wolf, haunted, powered by video games, flirtation, and tea. My colleague KC writes, I wasn't a tomboy by really any stretch of the imagination, and I don't really understand myself in a I was always way. And what I was a child with close relationships with men in my family. I experienced both deep confusion about those men's objectification of women and hurt and confusion about the abrupt distancing of our relationship when puberty started. Professionally, I am a Unitarian Universalist minister and a community-based sex educator. I inhabit both of those roles and the world as a fat, transgender, queer person. And adopting the form of KC's story, I will share mine. I, too, am a UU minister. I am a fat, non-binary, mostly heterosexual person. What does that mean? It means I'm comfortable in my biologically male body, and I also like to look pretty once in a while. I've enjoyed painting my nails and getting henna tattoos for many years. I never expected to have long hair until the pandemic provided me the chance, and I kind of love it. Some days I feel very masculine, very butch. Other days I feel more femme. That's why I like this whole gender of the day thing. It reminds me that everyone's gender gets expressed differently on different days. I am willing to answer questions about that, and that's a different thing I want to stress. In general, please do your own research about race or sexuality or gender. Don't ask your transgender colleague or coworker or friend unless they've given you explicit permission to do so. I give you explicit permission to do so. This is not a service about me. I just wanted to include my story as one more example of the ways that we're all different from each other. There's no monolithic trans or non-binary experience. And so a little more of a Trans 101 piece for the Worship Arts Committee. Sex and gender are different things. Biological sex is assigned at birth. It's about the plumbing of a person. Gender is the cultural and social understanding that's layered on top of biology. Sexuality and sexual orientation, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, are whom we are attracted to. Now, bi and pan, bisexual means they are attracted sexually to males and females. As we've embraced the idea that there's a spectrum of gender, many people have gone from being bisexual to pansexual, that they might be attracted to people of whatever sex and gender. There are also people who are asexual. They often call themselves ace. They don't experience much sexual attraction to anyone. A similar part of that spectrum is demisexual. They only feel sexually attracted after forming a strong emotional bond with someone. And as there is asexual, there's also aromantic, that they just don't get the romance of anything. The opposite of aromantic is alloromantic, which is what Kai had in their Twitter bio. The word transvestite is really not used anymore. Trans or non-binary, or as I heard at our regional assembly yesterday, not entirely cisgender. Gender fluid and gender queer sort of mean the same things. They're moving among gender identities and expressions. Gender non-conforming is the first word that I ever found I liked. I thought of the whole non-conforming thing was kind of cool. Gender non-compliant is also in that spectrum. And a lot of people are calling themselves gender apathetic now. I don't care what you call me, I'm just me. Gender expansive is also an idea there of sort of finding all the different ways we can be human. One last word you might hear in that area is two-spirit, and that's really a Native American term that pretty much, as far as I know, none of us in this room ought to be using, and only use it if someone explicitly tells you that that's what they are. But it's the idea that they have masculine and feminine spirits in one body. They may or may not identify as trans. In the biological piece, sort of, there's intersex. Now there's genetic, hormonal, and anatomical conditions in which a person's reproductive or sexual organs don't conform to the typical definitions of female or male. Oftentimes when a baby is born like that, the doctor freaks out and they try to do some surgery to make sure that they conform to one or the other. Don't do that in general. Some intersex individuals identify as transgender or gender variant, and some do not. Gender dysphoria is when a transgender person is still in the body they don't identify with, and that troubles them. For example, a trans woman who still grows a beard and has to shave, and it just bugs them and makes them sad that they're not ever going to be the woman they see themselves as. On the other hand, gender euphoria is when they do get to experience who they think they are and how much they enjoy that. There's a whole list of 10 ways to be more welcoming and inclusive of transgender people on the web. We're already going along today. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. Having gender-neutral bathrooms and not asking people about their gender is one of the big ones. Two of the big ones. The gender of this moment is the smell of French fries and the sea. This is a poem called Your Stories Belong to You by Ninan Teresa Soto. Dear trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender-expansive friends and kin, and those of us whose gender is survival, let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. You are not hard to love and respect. Your existence is a blessing. Your pronouns are not a burden or a trial. They are part of your name, just shorter. Someone getting them wrong is not a poor reflection on you. It is not your fault. Your body really and truly belongs to you, no one else. The stories of your body, the names of your body's parts, your body's privacy, the sum of your body's glory. It is not okay for anyone to press their story of you back to the beginning of our liberation. We will find the people ready to be on the freedom for the people way. We will go on. No one can rename you other. It can't stick as you offer the gift of being and saying who you are. Mostly, though, your stories belong to you. Your joy and complexity are beautiful, however you may choose to tell or not tell it. Some folks may take their liberty for an unholy license. You are beloved. Please keep to our shared tasks of healing and getting free. Reverend Soto reminds us that our trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender-expansive friends and kin are not hard to love and respect. Alas, some of our other human cousins do seem to find it difficult. I want us to learn to love and respect and welcome and include and celebrate the joy of transgender and non-binary lives while we work to make our congregations and communities and states safer for them to exist in. A teenager named Alex wrote, "Hi, in light of recent BS, I'm a transgender boy living in Alabama. I'm making this thread in a desperate attempt to make y'all see that I'm just a normal bleep kid. I grew up in a small town, firstborn grandchild on my dad's side, second on my mom's. I spent the night at my Nana's house on the weekends and played with my little cousin. I had a sizable collection of Monster High dolls and was enamored with J.R.R. Tolkien's work. I'm not transitioning because it's fun. My self-image as a child was built around being the perfect, hard-working, well-behaved little girl that everyone loved to have around. I'm not tearing all of that down for the hell of it. I'm not a rebel. I'm just a kid. I get stressed about science tests. I play video games. My favorite TV show is called The Midwife. I go to my friend's house and we watch TV and eat pizza. Trans kids are just normal kids whose sense of self doesn't mesh with their body." Alex and his family are concerned Alabama passed SB 184, making it a crime to provide gender-confirming health care to minors. Alex has a fundraiser up to get top surgery before all that becomes reality. Last week, Laura Morales wrote in the Texas Observer, currently 15 states have imposed restrictions on youth seeking gender-affirming health care. Last year, Arkansas became the first state to ban gender-affirming care for trans kids outright. Alabama followed suit earlier this month, making it a felony for doctors to administer puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery for transgender youth. In Florida, the Department of Health released a memo recommending that minors should not receive gender-affirming care. Lawmakers have justified these measures by saying that children who receive these treatments are not old enough to consent to them and that they may cause irreparable harm. And at the same time, these bills ban gender-affirming care for trans kids. They carve out exceptions to allow doctors to continue to perform medically unnecessary treatments to intersex infants, intended to make them fit into the categories of male and female long before they're old enough to express any form of gender identity. End quote. Florida's Don't Say Gay law makes teachings on sexual orientation or gender identity banned in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Teachings and discussion in that bill make this all very vague. Some parents will sue school districts because they believe any conversation about LGBTQ issues are inappropriate regardless of the child's age. Many such suits would probably be thrown out of court, but the time and experience of fighting them will create a chilling effect on any classroom conversation that even acknowledges that gay or transgender people exist. This will undoubtedly make it harder for the children and youth who are or love someone who is LGBTQ community. And that brings us to Emma Bell Holland's thread. Emma Bell was the designer of the Nicaea game, about which I preached earlier this year. 1 month ago, yesterday, was Trans Day of Visibility. She mentions her egg cracking. That's how she talks about when she finally accepted that she was transgender. Every day my heart breaks. Every day there's some new cruel legislation targeting people like me. Every day there's some new debate, some new talking point, some new punchline at our expense. Only none of the debates, talking points, or punchlines are new. It's hard to celebrate Trans Day of Visibility when every day feels like Trans Day of Despair. I've seen more than one trans person this year say, you know what, we're plenty visible. We don't need to be seen. We need you to do something. Don't tell me that I'm brave or strong or whatever. If you do, I will bleep block you. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. I'm not strong. I'm exhausted. Every day my heart breaks. I knew this going in. Trans lives were already being turned into the right's preferred target in 2020 when my egg cracked. Plenty of trans voices told you it was only going to get worse and were ignored. Bitter irony, I know so many trans women who chose the name Cassandra. There's something that sticks with me every time someone clutches their pearls about kids turning trans because it's trendy or they got confused. Like, what are you on about? You really think someone's going to subject themselves to all this if they didn't need to? Because the alternative to transition is misery. The alternative to transition is death. What makes it sound like this makes it sound like some terrible thing, like a last resort, which plays into the whole poor, sad transes BS, and I hate that, because trans isn't some horrible burden. Living in a transphobic society is. Living in an environment that chips away at you every day, that breaks your heart every day is. But being trans, being me, that's an absolute joy. I'd rather talk about that joy, about what I've gained rather than what I've lost, about the ways my heart has opened up than the ways my heart has been broken. Because it turns out, Amabel's pretty neat. Amabel's a lot of fun to be around. Amabel is a lot of fun to be. Certainly it's miles beyond the sad, empty, ill-fitting coat, at once too loose and too tight, that I wore for decades without even knowing I was wearing it. So here are some trans stories of joy for us, a few. My workplace had an amazing supportive gender transition policy. I read it and was blown away, and it made me comfortable enough to come out to my boss, who was 100% supportive and let me control the when and how of how I would come out to the rest of my unit. It was amazing. I just used my potential new name last night for takeout. I felt such joy that I'm keeping the receipt that has my new name printed on it. I was so nervous to update my pronouns at work, but no one batted an eye. On more masculine days, I get just as many compliments as I do on my femme days. I've got friends who seem to effortlessly switch between pronouns, making sure to use they as much as the others. I recently asked a friend whose child had come out as trans a few years ago if they had advice for any parents that were experiencing that now. They said, believe them. Use the new name and the new pronouns. And prepare for joy. Because my kid is the happiest she's ever been. My relationship with her is the best it's ever been. It's wonderful to see her blossom. Our last tweet of the day, Bryn Smith, I never knew I could be this happy. Thank you to everyone in my life who has supported me getting to this place. I had no idea how extreme a burden I was carrying by not being true to myself. I never knew I could be this happy. Please continue working to create a world where I can safely exist. So may we be. The gender of this moment is love